The first brick came through the front window at exactly 6:42 in the morning. I shot up from the couch, coffee still in hand, watching shards of glass spray across my living room floor like confetti at a riot. I ran to the window just in time to see a second brick smash through the bay window beside it, followed by a shrill voice yelling, "This is what happens when you ignore community rules." Standing on my front lawn in a pastel pink tracksuit and oversized sunglasses was the president of our HOA, Glenda Cartwright. The woman was practically a local horror story, mid-50s, hair sprayed into a helmet and a mouth that never stopped moving. She was flanked by two other board members, both holding their phones up like they were filming some kind of justice crusade. I couldn't believe it. Glenda Cartwright had just vandalized my home. Over what? A mailbox.
I'm Isaac Palmer.
38. Divorced.
Quiet.
I keep to myself, pay my dues, and mind my own business. But 3 weeks ago, I replaced my old, rusted mailbox with a sleek, modern black one. Apparently, that broke the sacred neighborhood aesthetic rule. I got a warning letter, ignored it, and figured that'd be the end of it. It wasn't. I opened the front door, fury building in my chest. "What the hell are you doing, Glenda?" She didn't even flinch. "You were warned, Mr. Palmer. That mailbox violates Section 12, Paragraph 6 of the Community Guidelines. You had 30 days to comply. Your blatant disregard for the rules is a threat to property values. That's not a reason to throw bricks through my window. Are you insane? Your behavior is criminal," she snapped. "You brought this on yourself." I took a breath, looked at my shattered windows, then at the security camera mounted above my porch. "Oh, thank God I installed that." "Glenda," I said slowly, "you just committed felony vandalism. And I have it all on video." Her expression faltered for the first time. "You wouldn't dare press charges. I'm the HOA president." I stepped back inside and shut the door in her face. The sound of her yelling something about community order was muffled by the glass crunching under my boots as I walked to the garage to find my phone. I called the police. Told them everything. Played the footage for the responding officers when they arrived 10 minutes later. They didn't need convincing there she was, in full HD, winding up and hurling bricks like a suburban pitcher. Glenda tried to turn the charm back on when the officers confronted her. "I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding. We were enforcing community standards, ma'am." One of the officers cut her off. "You're on camera destroying private property. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a felony." Her sunglasses came off. "I am the president of this HOA. I have authority." "You're also under arrest," the officer replied, slapping cuffs on her wrists. The two board members scattered like cockroaches. As they loaded Glenda into the back of the squad car, she shouted, "This isn't over, Isaac. The board will hear about this." I stood on my porch, arms crossed, glass crunching beneath me, and said, "Oh, they'll hear about it all right. In court." By the next morning, my house looked like it had been through a war zone. The wind had pushed leaves through the broken panes overnight, scattering them across the floor. I spent most of the early hours sweeping up the glass and taping thick plastic across the window frames to keep out the cold. I didn't even bother getting dressed, just wore old jeans and a hoodie with holes in the sleeves. My only plan that morning was to finish the police report, contact my insurance adjuster, and figure out where to start with a civil suit. I didn't get the chance to do any of that before a white SUV rolled up outside and parked across my driveway. A tall man in a navy blue blazer stepped out, carrying a leather-bound folder and wearing the kind of practiced smile that screamed, "Damage control." "Mr. Palmer?" he asked, walking up the drive like he owned it. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked over to the SUV, looked at his license plate, and took a photo. "Can I help you?" I finally asked, keeping my phone ready. "My name's Troy Delaney. I'm the HOA's legal counsel. I'm here to discuss yesterday's incident." "You mean your president committing a felony on camera?" He cleared his throat. That's one interpretation. I'm here to propose a resolution that might benefit everyone involved. Unless that folder contains a personal apology and a check for the cost of 2 custom windows, I'm not interested. He opened the folder and pulled out a typed letter. The board is prepared to issue a formal apology on Glenda's behalf. In return, we ask that you drop the charges. No admission of guilt, no civil action. Just a neighborly resolution. I laughed once, dry and sharp. You think a letter makes up for what she did? He kept his tone even. The board is concerned about optics. If this escalates publicly, it could affect property values across the neighborhood. So, that's what you care about. Not the law. Not a neighbor's safety. Just home prices. He didn't respond. I stepped closer, voice quiet but steady. I'm going to rebuild my windows. Then I'm going to rebuild something else, your entire board's reputation from the inside. You might want to start updating your resume. Troy watched me for a moment, then tucked the letter back into his folder. This could have been easy. Easy for who? He didn't answer. He walked back to his SUV, got in, and drove off without another word. By noon, I was at the city clerk's office filing a restraining order against Glenda. The officer reviewing my application raised his eyebrows as he scrolled through the video footage. She really did this over a mailbox, he said. I handed him a printed copy of the HOA's guidelines. There's nothing in here about mailbox styles. She made it up. He nodded slowly. You know, we've had a few complaints from your neighborhood over the last year. Mostly minor intimidation, threats of fines, weird enforcement tactics. But this is something else. Has anyone looked into them formally? I asked. Not yet, but it might be time. When I got home, I started digging. I pulled the HOA bylaws from the community website, then cross-checked them against the city's zoning laws. What I found made my stomach turn. The HOA had been enforcing rules that didn't exist. Several of their citations referenced sections that had been repealed 5 years ago. Others cited vague community standards with no actual wording to back them. More than once, they'd fined homeowners for violations that weren't covered under any enforceable guidelines. I printed everything, highlighted relevant sections, and started a binder. Then I went door to door. Most neighbors didn't answer at first. But when I explained why I was there, most of them opened up. I got fined for repainting my shutters, said Mrs. Liu, who lived 2 doors down. They said the color was too loud. It's beige. They made me tear up my garden beds, said a man named Carl. Said it disrupted the symmetry of the block. I had heirloom tomatoes in there. They double my dues without a vote, said a retired veteran named Dennis. Said it was emergency infrastructure budgeting. Then they repaved a tennis court. Every single person I spoke to had a story. And every one of those stories told me the same thing. Glenda and her board weren't just strict, they were running a rig system. That night, I called in a favor. My younger sister is a municipal attorney. She spent the last decade dealing with zoning disputes, property rights, and local governance. When I showed her the footage, the fake citations, and the stack of testimonies from my neighbors, she leaned back and said, "You've got them cornered." "I want to make it stick," I told her. "Not just a slap on the wrist. I want them removed. You'll need to file a petition to dissolve the board under Article 9 of the HOA's charter. If you can get 50% of the homeowners to sign, the city will step in and hold a hearing. Can you help me draft it?" She was already pulling up the forms before I finished asking. 2 days later, the petition was ready. I attached a QR code to the top linking to the video evidence. Beneath that, I listed the false citations, the illegal fine escalations, and the documented intimidation tactics. The signatures started rolling in fast. By the end of the week, I had 72 households signed, over 60% of the neighborhood. I submitted the petition to the city council clerk and scheduled a public hearing. That's when things got messy. The HOA sent out their own letter and signed, but clearly them warning residents that anyone supporting the petition would face legal consequences for defamation and breach of contract. I brought the letter to the city's legal department. "This is textbook coercion," one of the clerks said. "They're trying to intimidate witnesses. We'll notify the district attorney." The following week, Glenda was charged with a second count of criminal intimidation. Her bail was revoked, and she was remanded into custody pending trial. When news of that hit the neighborhood group chat run by someone other than the HOA, thankfully dozens more homeowners reached out with their own stories. I filed everything with the DA, who opened a formal investigation into the board's financial practices. Turns out they'd been skimming. Small amounts from pooled maintenance funds redirected through shell contractors, most of whom were related to board members. Over the last 3 years, they'd siphoned just under $80,000. Now we were looking at fraud, embezzlement, and a full audit. The city council scheduled the hearing in the community rec hall. It was standing room only. Residents filled the space wall to wall, some holding signs, others holding binders of their own. I stood at the front, petition in hand, with my sister beside me as legal counsel. The city official opened the floor. "Mr. Palmer, you initiated this hearing. You have the floor." I didn't waste time. Over the last year, this board has violated municipal codes, enforced fake bylaws, intimidated homeowners, and misappropriated funds. We have digital proof, financial records, and over 70 witness statements. We're not just asking for their removal, we're demanding it. The official nodded. "All in favor of dissolving the current HOA board?" Every hand in the room went up. Not a single one stayed down. The board was officially disbanded that night, pending criminal charges. A temporary management firm was appointed to oversee the transition, and elections were scheduled for 60 days later. I didn't run for a seat. I didn't want power. I just wanted peace. But when the new board took over and sent out a revised, legally accurate set of guidelines, they made one small addition at the top of the document. Any changes to community rules must be approved by majority vote. No exceptions. In memory of the windows that started it all. Fair enough, I thought. I can live with that. 2 days after the hearing, a manila envelope arrived at my door, dropped off by a courier wearing a plain navy windbreaker and a badge clipped to his belt. He didn't say much, just asked me to sign for it, and walked off down the street, shoes crunching on the gravel like he wanted to be anywhere else. Inside the envelope were copies of the preliminary findings from the city audit, along with a subpoena request from the district attorney's office for a formal deposition. I sat down at the kitchen table and read every page carefully, using a neon blue highlighter to mark the worst parts. There were bank statements showing payments to a landscaping company that didn't exist, invoices for maintenance on structures that were never built, and a shell company registered under a completely fake address, an empty lot behind a gas station on the other side of town. But what made my stomach tighten was a memo from the city auditor dated 18 months prior. It had been sent to the HOA during a routine review, flagging inconsistencies in their annual budget report. The memo had been signed as received by Glenda herself and promptly buried. No response, no clarification, no adjustments. Just ignored. And from that point forward, the siphoning increased. I took the file and drove to the DA's office that afternoon. The woman handling the case, Assistant District Attorney Lisa Kent, met me in a glass-walled conference room stacked with files. She wore a blazer the color of wet asphalt and carried herself like someone who didn't bother with small talk. "Mr. Palmer," she said, shaking my hand with a firm grip, "we've been going through the audit materials. You've uncovered something much bigger than a rogue board." "Bigger how?" I asked, taking a seat across from her. Several of the shell companies that received unauthorized payments are linked to transactions in other neighborhoods. Same signatures. Same contractor names. Different HOAs. We think this might be part of a coordinated fraud operation running through multiple boards. I raised an eyebrow. "You're saying there's more Glendas out there?" "Not just Glendas. Possibly a network, someone supplying these boards with fake service vendors, then taking a cut of the disbursements. If that's true, we're looking at organized fraud, possibly racketeering. My mind raced. What do you need from me? Testimony. You're our best documented case. You collected evidence before we even opened the file. Your footage, your paperwork, everything lines up. If you're willing to testify, we'll use your case as the cornerstone for the prosecution. I didn't hesitate. I'll do it. She nodded. Good. We'll issue a formal subpoena.
And
You might want to consider personal security. We don't know how far this thing stretches. That night, I installed 2 more security cameras, one above the garage, one overlooking the backyard. I didn't sleep much. Kept thinking about how deep this could go. How many other people had been bullied, fined, or silenced into submission while the board siphoned off their dues. The next morning, I got a call from Dennis, the veteran down the street. He sounded tense. Isaac, someone just tried to break into my shed. Middle of the night, cut the lock clean off. Didn't take anything, just left my files scattered everywhere. You think it's related? Only thing in that shed was my HOA documents. Old letters, statements, copies of fines. Nothing else was touched. I told him to stay put and called ADA Ken immediately. She dispatched a pair of investigators to Dennis's place within the hour. They dusted for prints, took photos, and bagged a broken lock someone had tossed in the bushes behind the fence. That same evening, another neighbor, Carl, the one who lost his tomato garden, called to say his mailbox had been ripped clean off its pole. No note, no explanation. Just a bent metal box in the middle of his lawn. 2 days later, someone slashed the tires on my truck. The intimidation was escalating. But what they didn't know was that the city had already tapped into the HOA's financial systems. The temporary firm put in place after the board was disbanded had turned over access to every ledger, every transaction, every scanned receipt. A forensic accountant was now tracing each dollar. Then came the big break. A payment marked as emergency sidewalk repair had been sent to a company called Jackpine Municipal Services. The invoice was signed by someone named Leo Driscoll. The city dug deeper and found that same name on 3 other HOA payments across the county. All recent. All unregistered businesses. And the kicker? Leo Driscoll was a pseudonym. The real man behind the name was a former contractor with a suspended license, Michael Harrow. He'd been arrested for fraud once before, years ago, but had served just 6 months before disappearing. Now he was back, funneling money through fake companies and using HOA boards as his private bank. ADA Kent called me in again. When I got to her office, she had a corkboard covered in strings and photos like something out of a crime drama.
we found him, she said.
He's been operating under aliases, using compromised board members to push through fake service contracts. Glenda's name is all over the approvals. So she was in on it? Lisa nodded grimly. She wasn't just in on it. She was the point of contact. My jaw tightened. She knew it was fake work. And she still signed off. She didn't just sign, she profited. Direct deposits into a personal account. We traced over $30,000 to her name. The next morning, Glenda was indicted on 7 felony counts, including wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and embezzlement. 2 other former board members were also arrested, one at the local gym, the other while trying to cross state lines. The neighborhood was stunned. For weeks, people spoke in hushed tones on sidewalks, trading pieces of the story like puzzle fragments. The temporary management firm held an emergency town hall in the local library, where ADA Kent gave a public briefing. I stood near the back, arms crossed, listening as Kent explained how deep the fraud ran, how many neighborhoods were affected, and how the DA's office was now working with state authorities to expand the investigation. One woman raised her hand. What happens to our dues? The money that's already gone. The court will appoint a restitution officer, Kent explained. Once we've recovered assets from the charged parties, Victims will receive compensation. It may take time, but we will pursue every cent. After the meeting, Kent found me among the crowd. You've done more than expose a corrupt board. You helped unravel a criminal network. I shook my head. I just wanted to change a mailbox. She allowed herself the smallest grin. Sometimes that's all it takes. Over the next several weeks, the neighborhood began to shift. People planted gardens again. Kids rode bikes without parents snapping at them for getting too close to someone's lawn. The new board, made up of actual volunteers this time, invited residents to submit ideas for community improvements. No more secret votes. No more fines without due process. Everything was transparent. And me? I got a new truck, replaced the mailbox, once more same sleek black one, and installed reinforced windows just in case. But mostly, I kept to myself and watched the neighborhood breathe again. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure no one else had to go through what we did. And knowing that sometimes, one act of defiance, just standing your ground, can bring down a whole tower of lies. Even if it starts with a mailbox. The trial began on a gray Monday morning with heavy clouds hanging over the courthouse like a warning. I sat just behind the prosecution's table, hands folded, watching as Glenda Cartwright walked in wearing a conservative gray suit that couldn't quite hide the tension in her shoulders. Her jaw was clenched tight, but her eyes darted toward the gallery, scanning faces like she was still trying to find a lifeline. She didn't find one. The courtroom was filled with residents from our neighborhood, those who had signed the petition, those who had been fined, threatened, manipulated. And not one of them looked back at her with sympathy. The charges had expanded since the indictment. After the forensic audit and testimony from other neighborhoods, the state prosecutor had stepped in. Glenda now faced 16 felony counts, including conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, falsifying municipal documents, and criminal misappropriation of funds. She was no longer just a disgraced HOA president. She was the centerpiece of an organized crime investigation that had reached across 5 counties. The prosecution opened with a methodical breakdown of the financial schemes. Every transaction was displayed on the screen: payments to shell companies, duplicate invoices, and falsified meeting minutes that approved work no one had ever seen. Each board vote authorizing the payouts had only ever been signed by 3 people: Glenda, her treasurer, and a man named Dale Fenwick, one of the HOA's contractors, who had disappeared 3 weeks after the arrests. When my name was called to testify, I stood and walked forward, ignoring Glenda's lawyer as he leaned in to whisper something to her. The prosecutor, Aaron Malloy, led me through my testimony with precision. Mr. Palmer, when did you first notice irregularities in the HOA's behavior? She asked. The day after I installed a new mailbox, I replied. I was cited for violating a guideline that didn't exist. And how did you respond? I checked the HOA documents, found the rule didn't exist, and ignored the citation. A few weeks later, the president of the HOA threw bricks through my windows. There were audible gasps behind me. Aaron nodded solemnly. And you submitted video evidence to law enforcement?
Yes.
From my porch security camera. After that incident, what actions did you take? I started investigating. With help from other homeowners, we collected evidence of fraudulent fines, unexplained financial activity, and coercive behavior directed at residents who pushed back. Aaron walked to a screen and tapped it once. A scanned image of a check appeared, made out to a non-existent maintenance company. The signature at the bottom was Glenda's. Mr. Palmer, were you able to determine where this money actually went?
Yes.
It was traced to an account held by Glenda Cartwright. The same account received over 30 transfers from similar companies over a 2-year period. And have you ever received a legitimate explanation from the HOA for these payments?
No.
Every inquiry was either ignored or met with threats. The defense tried to poke holes. Glenda's attorney suggested that I had a personal vendetta, that I had galvanized a mob to take down his client. He even implied I forged documents. But Erin was ready. She called up the city's zoning enforcement officer, who testified that Glenda had actively blocked their inquiries into the HOA's spending. Then came the forensic accountant, who dismantled the board's entire financial structure with a laser pointer and a calm voice. By the end of the second day, it was clear the jury didn't need convincing. But the real climax came on the third morning, when a surprise witness was escorted in by state investigators, Dale Fenwick, the missing contractor. He walked into the courtroom in cuffs, flanked by 2 officers, but seated himself at the witness stand without hesitation. When asked if he'd testify in exchange for leniency, he agreed. "She brought me in," he said, gesturing toward Glenda. "Said I didn't need to do the work, just file the invoices. The money would be split, and nobody would notice if we kept the amounts low enough. I didn't even have to show up most days." Glenda's lawyer objected, but the judge waved it off. "Did you know the companies you were submitting invoices for didn't exist?" "I helped register them under fake addresses," Dale admitted. "We used drop boxes and prepaid phones. She had a system." "Did she instruct you to create fake service logs?"
Yes.
"I still have the email templates she gave me." And then he said something that made the entire courtroom lean forward. "She told me the HOA was the perfect cover. People are scared to question authority in their own neighborhood. She said as long as we framed it as community maintenance, no one would challenge it." Glenda's hands gripped the table so hard her knuckles turned white. She didn't speak a word. The trial lasted 4 more days. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours.
Guilty.
On all counts. The judge didn't mince words at sentencing. Ms. Cartwright, you violated the trust of your neighbors, manipulated the authority granted to you by a governing document, and used your position to enrich yourself at the expense of those you were supposed to serve. Your actions were not just unethical, they were criminal. You will serve 12 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. All assets connected to the fraudulent activity will be seized and liquidated as part of restitution. I watched her being led away in cuffs, this time without the pastel tracksuit or the smug posture. Just a quiet, defeated woman who had believed herself untouchable. The fallout was massive. Several other HOA boards across the state were disbanded or placed under special oversight. The state legislature began drafting new laws requiring third-party audits for HOAs handling budgets over a certain size. A new hotline was created for anonymous reporting of HOA corruption, and the DA's office launched a task force to investigate similar schemes. Back in the neighborhood, the change was immediate. The newly elected board held open meetings every month, live-streamed for transparency. Residents voted on every major expense. Budgets were posted on a public bulletin board. And the fines? They were eliminated entirely for the first year while the community revised the bylaws, this time with actual legal review and input from every household. One afternoon, I was installing a new motion light by the garage when Dennis, now the board's vice president, walked up the drive with a folder.
"We just got word," he said.
"Restitution checks are coming in next week. The state recovered more than expected." "Good news for once," I said, testing the light sensor. He looked at the front of my house, freshly painted and now equipped with reinforced windows. "You know," he said, "this place used to feel like a trap. Now it feels like a neighborhood again." I nodded. That's what happens when you take the power out of the wrong hands. The sun dipped behind the trees as he walked off. I stood there for a moment, watching the porch light flicker on. A simple thing, but it felt like a small victory. No more secret meetings. No more fake rules. No more bricks through the window. Just peace. And the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when the wrong people come after you, sometimes the best revenge is holding them accountable publicly, legally, and without ever lowering yourself to their level.